We only remember 10% of what we read. So if we want to remember more, then we will need a different system for that, because reading isn't learning. For example, if you're learning for school, you wouldn't just read through the 300-page textbook once and expect to get A's for the whole year, right? So why should we expect to remember everything after reading the book just once? Because usually we don't remember things by accident. The first thing you can do if you want to remember everything you read is to consume less. It's better to read 10 books 10 times than to read 100 books one time. We don't want to read books just to be able to tell other people how many books we've read this year. Because at the end, it's not about having read 100,000 books, but to retain the knowledge and apply it to improve our lives. So slow down on the overconsumption. Something I see a lot of people do, and I also catch myself doing that, is trying to optimize our time spent consuming content. And what I mean by that is trying to read faster, watching lectures at triple speed, binge listening to audiobooks, or watching hours of YouTube tutorials. Trying to get so much information in your head as much and as fast as possible. It may feel efficient, but then why do we end up watching 5 more videos because the first one didn't help, or having to rewatch the same lecture over and over again because it didn't stick, or finishing a book and not remembering anything of it? The fix here is to process the information. We need to create a balance between consuming and processing. Everything we consume must be processed for us to be able to retain it. Otherwise, it will just go to waste, and the time spent consuming will just be wasted time. If we can only remember 10% of what we read, then we should focus on increasing our retention instead of focusing on consuming more. It may feel slower at first, but if you do the math, you're actually saving time and making a difference in your life. Now to the second step. Choose your book intentionally. So now that we've cut back on our consumption, we're going to have to be more picky with the content we're choosing to consume. That means be very selective of what you read. When choosing a book, think about the kind of person you want to be and find a book that is relevant to your life or a current situation that you're facing. Because we learn faster and remember more if the information is personal and actionable for us in the moment. And a reminder here, the whole book doesn't have to apply to you. If only one chapter sparks interest, then only read that one chapter. You can treat books like a choose-your-own adventure. You don't have to read everything from cover to cover. If a chapter is not relevant to you, feel free to skip it. And always feel free to stop reading a book if it doesn't catch you or apply to you. Because remember, the goal isn't to read a certain number of books by the end of the year, but to make your life better. And forcing yourself through a book you don't enjoy and wasting your time doing it is kind of the opposite. Step number 3. Get comfortable and make reading an enjoyable experience that you look forward to. School made many of us turn against reading books, stripping away the joy and making us even dread the thought of it. But reading shouldn't feel like a chore. It's supposed to be something that you're excited to do. So how can you do this? Make yourself cozy. Grab your favorite blanket, make yourself some tea or coffee, sit in a comfortable chair, get yourself some snacks, light a scented candle, listen to relaxing music in the background, etc. And on the other hand, make it a ritual. Dedicate a specific time of day to reading every day. You can light the same scented candle, drink the same tea every time. The more enjoyable you make the experience, the more your mind will associate reading with something positive and relaxing, which in turn also increases your capacity to remember more and helps you stay consistent in the long run. Step 4. Get curious. Prime your brain so you will want to learn. Curiosity activates our brain's dopamine system, which is linked to motivation and memory. Being interested in a topic makes it easier for us to absorb and retain the information, because our brain views the content as something valuable and rewarding. So how do we do this? First, ask questions and set a purpose before reading. What can I learn from this? Or how does it relate to my goals? Start by identifying a specific problem you want to solve or an interest you want to explore, and then frame reading as the key to unlocking that solution. By setting a clear intention and asking yourself questions about the topic of the book before you begin reading, you actively prime your brain to seek answers, and therefore making it easier to focus and to remember what you read. You can also do this by getting a general idea about the topic and exploring it just enough until your brain is starting to ask questions. And why this works is because our minds hate unsolved problems and questions. questions, specifically if we find them interesting. It's in our nature to try and fill that gap. Some ideas on how you can prime your brain: you can read a short article on a topic of the book, skimming through the table of contents of the books, reading the summary of a chapter before you're actually reading the chapter, or quickly skimming through the chapters and catching some keywords. Step 5, or rather a hack, and it is to combine reading with listening to it at the same time. It's proven to increase our retention and focus, because we're not just visually seeing the text, but we're also hearing it. And the way I do it, I always buy the physical copy and then I find the ebook version online. And the third step I do, which is not sponsored, is I use an application called Speechify. And what it does is you upload a PDF to it and then it reads it to you. You can change the speed, you can change the voice, you can download files and listen on the go. I do have the paid version, but they also have a free one. Step number 6. This might trigger a lot of people, but it is to make the book your own. And what I mean by that, write in it, highlight it, write in the margins, fold the corners, draw pictures, do whatever you want. Because interacting with the book will help you to retain the knowledge even better than just passively reading through it once. Now let's get more into detail about what it actually means. The first idea: underlining and highlighting the main ideas and valuable information. And to avoid highlighting too much or even everything, finish the chapter first and then go back. Because if you're new to the topic and you don't know anything about it, then every new information will seem important to you. Therefore, finish the chapter or the page first. Stop for a moment, let it sink in and try to understand it, and then go back and highlight what you want to remember or what seems important to you now. And the next way you can destroy your book is called marginalia. And what it means is to write in the margins of the pages. This is very useful for you in the future if you want to go back to the book and look something up, to find important parts or information in the book without having to read it all again. And if you really hate the idea of writing in a book, you can also just keep a notebook and write your notes in there. Now the different types of notes that you can take are summaries, questions you have, observations or connections with already existing knowledge, or you can discuss the idea of the book and write arguments against it. The key here is to make all type of notes and write down everything that comes to your mind. It's very important to write down everything you want to remember, because our brain is made to come up but not to store ideas, and you will forget them. Even if you think that you remember it, you won't. And the reason why I encourage you to write it down is because writing doesn't help us retain the information better, but it also makes us slow down and forces us to think. It also helps us to organize our knowledge better and to form new connections. Now to the 7th step. Have a system for your knowledge, aka a second brain. What we can do is we can write down all our thoughts in the book itself, or in a notebook, or on sheets of paper. But after weeks, months and years of doing that, this can get very unorganized and you won't be able to know where you can even find anything anymore. And the solution here is called a second brain. This idea was developed by Tiago Forte. And how it works is you have preferably a digital system. You can use an application like Obsidian, Notion, Roam, Evernote, or whatever works for you. Your Notes app might work as well, but I haven't tried that. And every time you learn something new or get a new idea, you write it down in the system. And the application I use is Obsidian. And what makes it so powerful is that you can link between 2 different nodes. And it creates this kind of network of connections, of nodes, just like how our brain works. And in there I write down everything. You can find summaries of videos, books, articles, ideas or bits of knowledge I found. And even this video script is in there, and it's linked to all the sources I researched to put together this video. Step number 8. Think and then write notes in your own words. Consume first and then take notes after. Otherwise, you won't focus or even try to make an effort to remember what you're just reading, because you're outsourcing this effort to the piece of paper. By instantly writing it down, you feel comfortable not spending much thought about it anymore. And the solution here is to read a few paragraphs of your book, close the book, and try to actively recall what you've just read and think about the idea and try to connect it with what you already know. And then you can write it down. But it's very important to do it in your own words. Don't copy it word for word, because you already have the book. You don't need another written copy of it, and you're not using your brain. Having to think about how to formulate it in your own words increases your ability ability to retain this information even more. The rule of thumb here is the more effort you have to put in, the more likely you are to remember it. And 2 other ways you can practice active recall to remember the book better. The first one, you can create a conceptual or a mind map, which will force you to connect different ideas together, which strengthens the connection to the new information, making it easier for you to remember it. And the second way you can do it is by explaining the concept in your own words or by answering questions about the topic. You can make like audio recordings on your phone and try to explain everything you learned. You can also just speak to yourself. But the hack why you should record, it forces you to actually think more about it and put in more effort because you don't want to mess up the recording, even if it's just for yourself. It puts a little more pressure on you and makes you think more, which in return strengthens your memory. And for the questions, you can just ask ChatGPT to give you questions that you can answer. But make sure to actually try to answer them before reading the solution to them. Because there's something called the fluency illusion, where we confuse recognizing information from actually knowing it. And the last and most important step number 9, is to take action. The mindset here is read with action in mind. Books are not meant to be remembered fully. We already have the book and we can look things up whenever we want. We don't need to remember it. Wanting to remember everything is just toxic productivity speaking. The point of reading isn't to remember every single detail we've read, but to use what we read to improve our lives. A rule of thumb I learned is that each chapter has to turn into one action point that you have to take as soon as possible, either today, tomorrow, or this week. To help you find these action points, think about how you can use this information that you're reading right now to apply it to your life. Don't be obsessed with knowledge acquisition, but with knowledge application. And take action as soon as possible and write down what you're going to do, either in the book itself, in a notebook or to-do list, because otherwise, like we've already established, you forget it. And the last tip that I want to give you is don't worry about perfection. Otherwise, you just get into analysis paralysis, which will lead you nowhere. Something I have to remind myself often is done is better than perfect. You're better off starting imperfectly than not starting at all. And don't worry, your system will evolve and improve over time. But if you don't start, then you won't even know what to improve. We learn best by doing. Therefore, take the first step so you can see the second step. And the key here is to repeat and do this process as much as possible. Because the more knowledge you have, the easier it is for new knowledge to fit into the system, because you have so many connections that can connect to it. You can imagine knowledge like a puzzle. When you first start out, you don't know where to put each piece and you're trying to guess and put it like anywhere. But the more pieces you've already found, the easier it is to fit a new piece into the puzzle. And it's the same for our memory as well. True learning comes from doing and not just consuming. And if you still feel like procrastination and perfectionism is holding you back, I've already created 2 videos about that. One video is about the different underlying reasons of why you're procrastinating and how to resolve each one of them. And in my other video, I talk about some science hack on how to beat procrastination if you just need a quick fix for it. So that's it for the video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something new and I wish you a great day. Bye bye.